we're going to obviously start off on our news coverage with the Burger Reich. It is upon us. It is here. Very much so. It is incredibly damaging. The Alien Enemies Act is being used for the first time ever in U.S. history when there is no active war happening. This is devastating for many different reasons, but it is one of the darker chapters of American history when we had Japanese internment camps here in the United States of America, as you guys might recall, during World War II. Instead of learning from those lessons and vowing to never repeat them again, Donald Trump has now decided to use that same act, this time against Venezuelans that he actually brought here. Venezuelans that had to escape Venezuela as a direct consequence of the sanctions regime that he implemented against Venezuela, and then also offered temporary protected status to. Donald Trump was such a fan of TPS that he actually offered an extension on the TPS, temporary protected status, that he had afforded to the Venezuelan migrants coming in from Venezuela, the refugees, on his way out. Now, 4 years after that fact, when he's back in office, he's back with a vengeance. He's now decided that if you are of Venezuelan descent in the United States of America with a temporary protected status, which means proper documentation, mind you, as a refugee, he will revoke it. He will treat you as a hostile enemy combatant, and he will falsely smear you and claim that you are a part of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua. And even if judges decide that this is illegal and try to hit a TRO, temporary restraining order, to stop the administration from falsely shipping Venezuelans, not to Guantanamo Bay this time, but instead to the CCOT facility in El Salvador, which is a direct concentration camp, the Trump administration will still follow through. They do not care. It is a new era of fascism. Earlier this morning, I said, I think that an even darker chapter of American history might be upon us. People might turn around and say, what do you mean, Hasan? America was founded on indigenous genocide. America was founded on ethnic cleansing and upholding chattel slavery. America was built on white supremacist slavery. You're right. And yet I still think that this next chapter in our history might be even darker than that. Truly. Because it kind of feels like we are moving into the new fascist movement here in the United States of America, like straight Nazi Germany. We have a lot more technological prowess to be able to engage in industrialized death, and we are officially there. Let's take a look.
Over the weekend, the Trump administration deported hundreds of Venezuelans that it says are gang members, despite a judge's order to turn the flights around. The law at issue dates to 1798. A constitutional clash is likely looming. Chief White House correspondent Mary Bruce is tracking the story. Good morning, Mary.
George, good morning. Well, we are now seeing a real showdown between this administration and the judicial branch. The White House this morning is celebrating this move, insisting the president is acting within his authority to speed up deportations, despite that directive from a federal judge that these Venezuelan immigrants be returned to the U.S. immediately. This morning, hundreds of alleged Venezuelan gang members are waking up in prison in El Salvador after the Trump administration rapidly deported them, ignoring a federal judge's directive. This video shared by El Salvador's president shows the...
It's sad that we will never ignore injunctions or court orders at the behest of a greater good for the public. Like the what are you going to do about it mentality should have been ever present when the Biden administration was following the letter of the law and using its executive powers to abolish all student loan debt, right? Can't do that. No, we can't do that. Those are institutions that we must defend. Okay. Here's how you do it for evil. It only goes in one direction.
The alleged members of the Tren de Aragua gang arriving in San Salvador Saturday, just hours after a judge ordered planes carrying the men to immediately...
Yeah, they're doing straightforward Nazi propaganda on this, by the way. They're doing straightforward Nazi propaganda on this. They shave their heads. There is no justification shown whatsoever that any of these people that were targeted and picked up were actually a part of any gang. Even if they were a part of Tren de Aragua, by the way, this kind of, like this right here, what they're doing here is completely unjustifiable. We have due process. You can't do that, or you must not do that. We're officially in the black bagging stage. ICE comes in, does dragnets, grabs people, claims that they're Tren de Aragua, claims that they're a part of a terror group now, claims that they're a part of a gang engaging in criminal activity, and then ships them to a foreign nation. and we've contracted out because we outsource everything. We've also outsourced our concentration camp, dude. This is how it happens. For people that wonder, like, how did we get here? How did Nazi Germany become what it was? Like, this is it. You're here. You're watching it happen. You're watching an overseas example in Israel, and you're watching the domestic example here in the United States of America.
Trump over the weekend invoking the Alien Enemies Act, an obscure wartime law from 1798, allowing the government to deport non-citizens with little or no due process. The law last used to play a role in the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II.
I'll simply say they never should have been allowed into our country in the first place. It's ours.
Trump allowed them into the country. Trump is a major role player in why they had to leave Venezuela. Okay, it's not just about Maduro. You need to understand something. I don't care what like Venezuelans that live here will say over and over again. I don't care what the media says over and over again. Trump and his sanctions regime on Venezuela played a very big role in the Venezuelan economy tanking even further at a time when they needed aid. They said, Maduro's a bad guy, fair, sure, whatever, and use that as a justification to make the economy scream. And the economy did scream. Trump, politically, as he has done in the past, as the American administrations have done in the past with like Cubans who are escaping Cuba, right, offered Venezuelans temporary protective status. He said, you guys are political refugees. We are anti-communist. You are anti-communist. Come to America. We'll use you. Right? That's usually the goal for American empire. They bring in a bunch of reactionaries or bring in a bunch of people who are escaping political repression and use them as a propaganda tool. So that's what we did. The American government did that. And in the process, Donald Trump was such a fan of offering temporary protective status to the Venezuelan refugees that came into the United States of America that he actually extended it on his way out. And then Joe Biden became president for 4 years. And now he turned around and is revoking the TPS in this insanely violent manner, deciding that every single Venezuelan on U.S. soil that has documentation, mind you, documented or undocumented, but virtually all of the Venezuelans on U.S. soil are documented. They have the paperwork. They got temporary protective status. Understand that they have the documents. These are not undocumented migrants, okay? They have the documents or they're in the process of getting their documentation, as in their court documents. The Trump administration turned around and black-bagged a bunch of Venezuelans that they had actually welcomed into U.S. Inside of the U.S. boundaries in a pure political ploy. Decided to ship them to the El Salvador Anti-Terror Prison Unit, CCOT. We've watched the El Salvador CCOT prison before on this broadcast because a bunch of right-wing Mexican YouTubers went there and glazed Bukele and also the prison structure and talked about how awesome it is that they're like torturing people there. Lights on 24/7. Here we are. Another gross violation of human rights. 7.7 million Venezuelans have left the country since 2015. Okay. They've gone mostly to other Latin American countries. Some of them have gone to Spain, and some of them have made their way all the way to the United States of America. The largest population went to Colombia, obviously, as I talked about before. This is a major destabilizing force. When you have 7.7 million refugees, you have a refugee crisis, and it did not have to be this way. Even before he started the slave labor business, I could take one look at this guy and guess he was already embezzling from the treasury. Not that we needed the help, but American prestige will crater even further when everyone figures out the obvious here. Yeah. Nayib Bukele, who has been yelled at by Donald Trump, ironically enough, on numerous occasions, which is why I always thought it was strange. Donald Trump would go on CPAC and be like, Nayib Bukele, he sucks. He's dumping out his prisons, like probably because he doesn't know anything about Latin America. He probably thinks El Salvador is Venezuela or something. And he would constantly shit on Nayib Bukele, who's also a crypto guy, is now working with him because he said, hey, it's great. Send us all of your deportees. We'll use them as slave labor in our fucking concentration camps. That's where we're at right now. I need you to understand how insane this is. I'm not being hyperbolic at all. Okay, this is not hyperbole. We are here. We are officially in Nazi Germany status, but unlike Nazi Germany's concentration camps being maintained directly by, people of German descent or the foreign legions or whatever, we are outsourcing the concentration camp to El Salvador. Now, watch this video. Watch this promotional video from Nayib Bukele and tell me that this isn't Nazi shit, okay? Go ahead. Nayib Bukele says, today, the first 238 members of the Venezuelan criminal organization Tren de Aragua arrived in our country. They were immediately transferred to CICOT, the Terrorism Confinement Center, for a period of 1 year, renewable. The United States will pay a very low fee for them, but a high one for us. Over time, these actions, combined with the production already being generated by more than 40,000 inmates engaged in various workshops and labor under the Zero Idleness Program, will help make our prison system self-sustainable. As of today, it costs $200 million per year. On this occasion, the U.S. has also sent 23 MS-13 members wanted by Salvadoran justice, including 2 ringleaders. One of them is a member of the criminal organization's higher structure. This will help us finalize intelligence gathering, go after the last remnants of MS-13, including its former and new members, money, weapons, drugs, hideouts, collaborators, and sponsors. As always, we continue advancing in the fight against organized crime, but this time we are helping our allies, making our prison system self-sustainable and obtaining vital intelligence. They're making their prison system self-sustainable by doing slave labor. We're doing slave trade shit for Venezuelans who have not gotten any due process whatsoever. Venezuelans that have not, this is a work camp, okay? Arbeit macht frei shit, understand? Work sets you free shit. It is, I don't know what words to use. Like, it is not hyperbolic at all when I say this. We're there. We're here, okay? This is it. This is the first step of the final act of the darkest chapter of American empire, okay? Full tilt fascism. It was the first thing that Rubio made headlines doing when the admin got into office. It supposedly can hold 40,000 people, and Rubio said we'd like to send U.S. citizens there as well. Yes, I remember. Anyway, watch this. Watch this and tell me if this isn't Nazi propaganda. They grabbed a Venezuelan dude for having tattoos. Like, that's what they're doing. And they're like, think about it. We didn't use the Alien Sedition Act post 9/11. We didn't even use the Alien Sedition Act post 9/11. There is no war happening right now, and the Trump administration is claiming that it's an invasion, that migrants are invading. How do you not see that this is an even greater expansion of the previous surveillance state? This is not a justification for the previous surveillance state. I have fought against it every single step of the way. Having said that, this is moving beyond that now. This is a logical conclusion. Oof. Why are they firing their heads down when moving them? It's just different ways of engaging in like body torture, dehumanization, and to keep them in a state where it's an intimidation tactic. It's a way to keep them as like non-threatening as possible. It's like more difficult to do, more difficult to resist. It's also dehumanizing. It's like when you realize that the cruelty is the point, you will recognize why they're doing all of this. Yeah, human rights organizations have been actively writing about CICOT, actively writing about the lack of due process in El Salvador for almost a decade at this point, since it began, since it opened up, these facilities opened up.
But after some non-citizens represented by the ACLU sued the administration, that federal judge in an emergency hearing Saturday.
Yeah, they also actively ignored the court orders, okay? The White House says it ignored a court order to turn around 2 plane loads of alleged Venezuelan gang members because the flights were over international waters and therefore the ruling didn't apply, okay? It doesn't matter anymore. Like, they're basically saying, like, nope, there's nothing you can do about it. They were already in the air. Like, it's crazy. No rules, baby. Once the plane wheels are up and you're on international airspace, is over. You can do whatever you want.
Saturday ordered any plane containing these folks that is going to take off or is in the air needs to be returned to the United States, adding this is something that you need to make sure is complied with immediately. The 2 planes already in the air, sources tell us the administration made the calculated decision to ignore that directive. Sources say the planes carrying the alleged gang members took off during the hearing, the administration eager to get them in the air out of U.S. airspace and over international waters before the judge's ruling. In response to that order to turn the planes around, the president of El Salvador, a Trump ally, posting, "Oopsie, too late."
They needed to be brought back.
The other side of this, aside from like the active cruelty that we are watching in broad daylight as the government is functioning, in this like fascist state, collaborating with another fascist government, is that they're so fucking lame. Like, oopsie libtard. It's like I don't know what the historic equivalent of this is, okay? Like, the aesthetics are also busted. Everything is devolved. It's like moving away from the old Nazi font to Comic Sans as you're doing fascism.
But the White House this morning insists the administration did not violate the court order and that the president acted within his authority, claiming federal courts have no jurisdiction over the president's conduct of foreign affairs or ability to remove foreign enemies. Now, all of this is coming as a Brown University professor, Dr. Rasha Alawi, a kidney transplant specialist, has been deported despite having a valid work visa and despite a court order temporarily blocking her expulsion. A Lebanese citizen, she was detained last week after returning to the U.S. from visiting family and put on a plane out of the country, again, despite that court order. A hearing in this case is expected later today.
Okay,
George.
Mary, thanks. Let's get more on this from our chief Washington correspondent, John Carl. John, let's start with...
I get what you're saying, but why would you want gang members in your country? Oh my God. Chatter. I'm going to explain this one more time. Why do you believe everything that the government tells you? Why do you automatically assume that every single person being deported is a gang member? Why do you not want the American court system to actually actively handle violent gang members? Why? Not every country is El Salvador. Not every country has a concentration camp like this. If there are violent criminals that have engaged in violent criminal acts and they don't have citizenship on U.S. soil, I want them to be prosecuted and placed in an American facility. Okay, I want them I want the victims to see justice. That's number one. Number two, these people that are being deported, a big part of this problem right now is that they're nabbing everybody, whoever they can, without any sort of consideration, without any due process whatsoever. Due process is a right. It exists for a very good reason. It's so that the government doesn't do this, because the government that can do this to Venezuelans can do this to other Americans as well eventually. And if you think that they're not going to do that, you are fucking delusional. They are lying to you. They're trying to get you to respond by going, I don't understand. Why do you want violent criminals to stay in this country? That is the entire purpose. That is the entire reason as to why they are claiming anyone and everyone is a terrorist. They said this about Mahmoud Khalil, who was not a terrorist at all. He was a Columbia University student negotiator. He was a lead negotiator for the student movement on Columbia campus. He had never violated a single law, and they actively admitted that. They said he didn't violate anything. We just think he's a terrorist. We think he's a threat to American foreign policy, so he's now going to get deported. We're going to revoke his green card. A green card means you have legal permanent status. A green card is one step removed from being a naturalized citizen. The only difference between a green card holder and a full-blown U.S. citizen is that you just, or a naturalized citizen, is that you don't have the right to vote. That's it. He endorsed terrorism? No, he didn't. No, he did not. And for the record, even if he had, that is not, it's not, you can't deport someone or revoke their citizenship for that reason. You can't do that.
Following the Trump administration's move to deport more than 130 Venezuelan immigrants by invoking the Alien Enemies Act over the weekend, you might be wondering, what exactly is that law? Well, the Alien Enemies Act was passed in 1798. It says if the U.S. is either at war with or facing an invasion from a foreign nation or government, then the president can remove non-U.S. citizens affiliated with the, quote, hostile country in question. The act has been used just 3 times in U.S. history, during the War of 1812, World War I, and World War II. That last and most recent example famously led to the internment of 31,000 non-citizens of Japanese, German, and Italian descent after the bombings of Pearl Harbor. By the way, decades later, under President Reagan, the government issued a formal apology, calling it a grave injustice and acknowledging that it was motivated largely by racial prejudice. Back to today. The U.S. is not at war with Venezuela, but the Trump administration claims that we are facing an invasion of dangerous gang-affiliated people from that country. And on Saturday, hundreds of deportees, including the accused Venezuelans, were processed at a Salvador jail, despite a U.S. judge's order 1 day earlier not to deport them. It all raises questions over whether President Trump has the authority to use the Alien Enemies Act in this way.
Yeah, they're using predatory incursion instead of declared war invasion because it's not an invasion, it's not a declared war. So they're saying that this is a predatory incursion. That is the attempt of legally justifying this new erosion of pre-existing rules. Something that hasn't been utilized post 9/11, mind you. And obviously, this doesn't mean that we didn't black bag people and send them the Gitmo during 9/11. We did in the aftermath of 9/11. Of course we did that. This right now would not be able to happen if we didn't do that, if we didn't already violate pre-existing rules. This is, however, a new degree because this gives a broad, if implemented, if solidified by the Supreme Court, this is the first step to legally justifying concentration camps. Okay, a legal justification for permanent detention, torture, violation of due process, and targeting people on the basis of their ethnic identity, targeting people on the basis of their background, documented or undocumented. It doesn't matter. And I need you guys who are legalists, okay, who look at the law and say, well, the law is the law, follow it, to understand something. The Nazis did something similar as well. So did the apartheid South African government. Every single government that does horrifying acts like this, that we now understand with the benefit of hindsight was horrifying, doesn't just go around being like, we're evil and we're doing this because we love violating the law. No, they create a legal justification for it. That is precisely why I always say slavery was legal. Freeing slaves was illegal. Okay? Sheltering Jews was illegal in Nazi Germany. There was a legal framework created to go after every single Jewish person, go after every single disabled person, go after every single gay person, go after the Roma population, and put them in concentration camps and death camps. There is a legal framework that is always set by the administrative apparatus. They don't just say, we love violating the laws, lol, what are you going to do about it? Even though this administration is so incompetent that they do kind of say that, ultimately there are still more intelligent people behind the scenes that are trying to find a way to rework pre-existing laws and precedents in an effort to make it so, that this is legally appropriate. It's above board.
The other thing to note is that this law, using this law, is an attempt to bypass due process, which is a constitutional right that even non-citizens have. And so these men who are being accused of being members of Tren de Aragua are not receiving real hearings. There's no real evidence that would stand up in a court of law or an immigration proceeding. And so we don't actually know who we're deporting.
So there's limited precedent here. It's just been invoked 3 times in the past.
I need you guys to understand something, by the way. Even though the administration is coming out now and saying, well, we actually think the court order is patently unlawful. That's not the internal conversation that took place. The internal conversation behind closed doors that took place was not whether or not the court order was unlawful, because it's not. It is a lawful court order. And actually, what they're doing is violating the law. The real conversation that took place behind closed doors was, what are they going to do about it? Can we get away with doing this? And they decided, yes, we can get away with doing this. We can get away with just not listening to the courts. This actually shakes the foundation of the judiciary in a very meaningful way. This is a huge, huge erosion of the checks and balances that are supposed to exist in this country that obviously have been neutered. Like, the legislative body is completely ineffective. It is completely neutered But this is a constitutional crisis ready to explode, okay? This is 2 months in, and we are officially saying bye-bye to the judiciary. You need to understand how damaging that is. You need to understand how devastating that is. The last set of checks is now being eroded, shredded. Americans, I think, due to the comfort of living in the imperial core, cannot comprehend what it's like when a fascist dictatorship overtakes your government. An authoritarian leader comes in and just starts violating all of the previous remaining institutions and just does whatever it wants to do. You guys don't see it because you're not used to it. You've never experienced it. You don't understand. Coming from Turkey, okay, I know exactly what the fuck is going on, and I keep ringing the alarm bells, but people don't see it. Any chatter who is one generation removed or lived anywhere else outside of the United States of America, in a developing nation, a second world nation, third world nation, knows exactly what the fuck is going on. But Americans living in the heart of empire have never experienced something like this, so they just don't understand it. And as long as, jalapeno poppers are $5 still, they're like, yeah, it's fine. I'll give you an example of what's going on right now, okay? A personal example for an immigrant rights attorney. Returning to Twitter to shine a light on what the Alien Enemies Act looks like in real life. Our immigration defense client fled Venezuela last year and came to the U.S. to seek asylum. He has a strong claim. He was detained at entry because ICE alleged his tattoos are gang-related. They are absolutely not. Our client worked in the arts in Venezuela. He is LGBTQ. His tattoos are benign, but ICE submitted photos of his tattoos as evidence that he is Trendaragua. His immigration defense attorney planned to present evidence he is not, but never got the chance because our client has been disappeared. We last spoke to our client on Thursday before he was supposed to have a hearing in immigration court, but ICE didn't bring him. This is what I mean when I say this is a violation of due process. The government attorney had no info about why he was not there. The judge reset the hearing for Monday. We've been trying to contact him ever since. We emailed and called the Texas facility where he was last held, more than 1,300 miles from the San Diego detention center he was in when we started representing him. They had no info on their client, and yesterday told us he was no longer there. This morning, he disappeared from online detainee locator. Our client came to the U.S. seeking protection, but has spent months in ICE prisons, been falsely accused of being a gang member, and today he was being forcibly transferred, we believe, to El Salvador. We're horrified tonight thinking of what might happen to him now. The Alien Enemies Act would allow Trump administration to remove people from the U.S. based on an accusation alone. The accusation could be, as it is for our client, completely baseless, but they would remove them anyway, despite the dangers, despite the lack of due process. What happened today is a dark moment in our history. One bright spot in this madness that I see are the many lawyers and advocates across the country who spent their Saturday fighting like hell to preserve justice in the face of horrific cruelty, and we will keep fighting.
Is the administration prepared to give the court what it wants in terms of the time of the flights that departed, that went to El Salvador, and some of those details that the judge is asking for in trying to determine the timing? Clearly, the 5 named individuals were not deported in compliance, but looking more broadly, wanting to know about the timing of flights and so forth, because the verbal order did say turn around the flights if there's an issue. So is the administration prepared to provide that information?
I'm prepared to provide it right now. All of the planes that were subject to the written order, the judge's written order, took off before the order was entered in.
The thing that people don't understand is if you violate due process because you've decided that this person is non-citizen, that means someone can say you're a non-citizen. You have no protections. What are you going to do? Go to court? You're not going to court. You can't prove that you're a fucking citizen without due process. But they don't understand that. People are too stupid to recognize that. So dumb.
In the courtroom on Saturday, and the administration will, of course, be happily answering all of those questions that the judge poses in court later today.
And for people who have due process questions about making certain that there wasn't anyone who was swept up who did not meet the criteria that you laid out, is there a way for the administration to provide more detail about how that was determined, who the individuals were that met this deportation order?
Yes, I can assure the American people that Customs and Border Patrol and ICE and the Department of Homeland Security are sure about the identities of the individuals who were on these planes and the threat that they pose to our homeland. They take this incredibly seriously. They are putting their lives on the line to deport these designated terrorists.
That's not how this works. What do you mean? Some fucking moron without a GED doesn't get to make this choice. on their own. Like, what are you talking about? Oh, well, they're sure that these guys are bad. Oh, okay, my bad, dude. Shit. Oh, the Gestapo is sure that these guys are bad? I guess, like, fuck the courts then. That's the question, dumbass. The entire question is, where's the evidence? And will you reveal the evidence? And also, simultaneously, why did you not go through the proper process? There's already a proper process for doing deportations. You can't just fucking decide, well, this guy looks weird, he's done. I think he's a terrorist criminal. The question is directed very specifically towards Caroline Leavitt and this administration to be like, hey, kind of weird that, you know, there are some of these guys had court cases, like active court cases, and you just like remove them without a judge seeing whether or not they're actually fucking terrorists.
Terrorists from our country, and they should be trusted to do that. And that's exactly what the American people elected this president to do.
Thanks, Caroline. Just to follow up on that then, so you're saying definitively that the administration can prove everyone that was put on those flights to El Salvador was either a member of Tren de Aragua, MS-13, or some other entity?
We've already provided the breakdown in the effort of transparency about the 261 illegal aliens who were deported. 137 of those were deported under the Alien Enemies Act. 101 of those were Venezuelans removed via Title VIII, which, as you know, are just regular immigration proceedings. And 23 of them were MS-13 Salvadorian gang members. There were also 2 MS-13 ringleaders as part of that group of 23 who President Bukele particularly expressed his gratitude for their return so he can demand justice in his home country. Jennifer.
What criteria, though, other than, say, tattoos or maybe being in the wrong place at the wrong time, are they using to determine that someone is actually a member of one of these organizations?
Intelligence and the men and women on the ground in the interior of our country who are finally being allowed to do their jobs. Their hands were tied under the previous administration, and as I said, they take their jobs very seriously. They should be trusted and respected by the American public with this operation, and of course, as I said to Kelly, the administration will provide all details to the questions that the court poses.
Okay, I need to explain something to you guys. Even if they are literally the most violent criminals you have ever seen in your entire life, you still can't deport them without a court hearing. That is fucking insane. You can't do that because this is not about the individual scary migrant. This is about the entirety of the court system and the reasons for why it exists. You can't trust me, bro, as a fucking means of deportation. That makes no sense, because if they can do that now for people that they are claiming without any sufficient evidence and no actual court orders, and the only court order basically being the exact opposite, they can do that to anybody. So this conversation that's taking place is not even about like the immediate Venezuelans or the immediate El Salvadorans that were deported. It's even broader than that.